All right. So last week we had talked mainly about, three things. Okay, we had gone down the route of class preparation. What do you remember from that stuff? And if anything at all? Class prep.
Know your audience.
That's one thing to do. Yep.
I wasn't here last week, but I have your book, and I read a little bit last week, and I think one thing is let somebody know early if you can't take your class.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. Be, I guess, considerate, right, of other people's time, if you're not able. So we talked about the class prep, classroom environments. We talked about that matters. It does play a part in people's learning sometimes. How you want to set it up, maybe, and run it. Being prepared for class. We talked about. Knowing your material, that's very important. Making sure we teach to meet needs. There's proactive preparation. What was that?
Thinking about considering what type of questions might arise from the class, trying to being anticipatory of, and that knowing the subject material will help with that. What kind of things might I need to address in class in relation to the material that I'm putting out?
Bingo. Yeah. Preparing, anticipating things. This is a hot button issue, or this is confusing in the text. Might want to go there. Might want to prepare for that. Leadership also comes down to this, or whoever is in charge of getting curriculum together, right? I know we met last night we're trying to get things ready for 2027. What do we want to, what route do we want to go? We want to get that stuff to our teachers early so that it gives them the best chance to be prepared, right? With what they need to know and what they want to talk about and teach, bring up. So all very important things, but definitely proactive preparation is something to really think about and prepare for. That's going to take more time sometimes in your prep, especially if you're not familiar with something, but that's just comes with the territory. All right, just put in the time and do it. Okay, we had briefly jumped into finding things to teach. Yes, sometimes, even though we work with the Bible a lot, it can be difficult sometimes to find things or figure out things to teach, especially if you're just kind of flying on your own. You don't necessarily have a curriculum to go off of, right? Maybe some of us have been in those situations or positions. What in the world do I teach? Where can I go? Sometimes it's kind of hard to nail down. Okay, but let's say that you are kind of left on your own to figure out something to teach. It's going to be very tempting. I know, like if you're not as well versed in the Bible, it's going to be very tempting to grab some sort of spiritual book and kind of just go off of that, right? And just kind of use that as a kind of a jumping off point, right? I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying that's wrong at all. I think there are plenty of books that are out there that you can use as a guide, okay? But let it be that, right? Just let it be a guide, let it be a tool at the same time. Okay, some of those books, hey, they've got nice little 13 chapters for you, right, with discussion questions included. And I think I've been seeing more and more books that at least in the church that guys have been putting out that have been, I don't know if anybody else has noticed that, but like 12, 13 chapters, discussion questions in there. And I think people are, just trying to help, do the church a solid a little bit and help them out to use, which is nice. It's nice, okay? And those are good. Okay, so I'm not saying they're wrong, but do not let the Bible intimidate you to the point that you never reach for it. Okay, or you teach more from devotional books than you do the Bible. Don't do that. We've got to always remember to keep, like what we said, keep the Bible in Bible class. That's what it's called, so keep it in there. That's what people need. Personally, I think sometimes part of the reason people can become spiritually deficient is because we may not have gotten as far or deep in the Bible as we should have. I think that happens. It can happen. Okay? So, anyway, but teach the Bible. Remember to teach the Bible. Missed that slide. All right. So, as you teach the Bible, you can work out of a letter or a book, I should say. You can look at certain lessons that we get out of said book, whatever it is. You can teach on themes that you can find. You can walk through each chapter and kind of verse by verse it, right? You can pull things out. You can make application from that. You can find, the text that teaches something that you have in mind and teach from that. If you're wanting to talk about, for instance, being strong as a Christian and standing firm, such as maybe Ephesians chapter 6 that talks about that, you can go there. You can talk about the armor of God. If you want to talk about things that are a bit more practical and common Christian living, jump into James. Use that. Even Ephesians, you can do that. Okay? I've been preaching from Ephesians quite a lot. Regardless, though, when you are trying to decide, what things to teach on, I would just make it a practice to match the text to the principle, rather than trying to force principles onto a text that actually doesn't teach that principle in the context. Okay? Be very careful doing that. Be very careful doing that. Sometimes what can happen is people, they've got ideas floating around in their mind. This does happen a lot with preaching. They've got ideas floating around, and then they go to passages that might mention something related to that idea, but then because they want to teach or preach what they're thinking about so much, what can end up happening is kind of pushing those ideas onto the text when the text actually doesn't even teach what they're thinking. Does that make sense? That can happen. That's the classic exegesis, eisegesis stuff. If you were in the exegesis class, we did talk about that. Drawing things out of the text versus putting things into the text, right? So just remember, you will always be on solid ground if you just let the text produce for you what it is already saying. You'll always be on solid ground there. Okay? Just draw it right out of that. Go right from the text, draw your application right out of that. You're on solid ground. Okay? There's no guesswork. Now your application and stuff will change, and when we get into application, we'll talk about all that. But now I'll say, too, if you wanted to, let's say, perhaps you want to go off on a word study or something like that, you can grab a concordance, okay? That's fine. Just make sure that whatever word that you're trying to study, make sure that you understand the context also of where those words are actually found. Okay? Just because you see a word in this passage in some Old Testament book, that doesn't necessarily mean that is talking about what you're trying to talk about. Okay? That word might be there, but just because it's there doesn't mean that's the right context. Does that make sense for what you're trying to get across? Okay? So if you're going to do that, just go read the context first. Make sure you are applying that correctly. Okay? Just you got to think about those things. You don't want to end up teaching something that the text actually doesn't teach. That's the whole point. All right? So, something else to think about. The book, Creative Bible Teaching, talks about this. I thought it was a really good insight, actually. But this quote here, I thought was interesting. He said, the point is that what we choose not to teach or exclude from our teaching of a subject also teaches. What does he mean by that?
That by not making a choice, you still make a choice, as Rush said.
Exactly. By not making a choice, that is a choice, right? So what you choose not to teach and what you keep skirting around on sometimes, that also teaches and says something, right? Okay, you're just kind of dodging it, so to speak. And I thought that was interesting. It is okay to be selective, okay? But over time, when what we don't teach still teaches over time, okay? It still may send an indirect message to people. I think he called that null curriculum, which was an interesting term. Okay, so we do need to remember that as teachers. All right, we do accept the terms and conditions of teaching what the Bible teaches. Teaching the full counsel of God, just like Paul said, whatever, I forgot the Acts chapter. 18? Is it 18 or 20? Yeah, 20. I didn't shrink back from declaring to you the full counsel of God, right? So, look, that, again, comes with the territory, okay? It also teaches what we don't teach. Any thoughts on those things?
I think sometimes that null curriculum comes up very heavily sometimes also on our preparation, because if there's something we're not very comfortable with, we just really don't know how to apply it. We don't know if that's really what the text says. We'll dodge it, but the problem is everybody out there is looking at the same verse that we are. While we're able to kind of skate around it, they're trying to come to terms with, well, what is this saying? Because I'm seeing something and I'm not understanding it. What do we do with it?
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure that that's not coming from a place of a lack of preparation.
Yeah.
Because that's, like he says, it's still going to teach something. It just may not be what we would have wanted it to have taught.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, that just goes back to if you are confused on something, just get help. Reach out. It's not, I mean, you might think it's an embarrassing thing, but what's more embarrassing? You going and asking somebody, hey, what is this teaching? Or you making a fool of yourself right in front of 35 people? Yeah, don't do that. Just, if you don't know, then get help. It's totally fine, okay? It is too big of a risk. It is too big of a thing to take that risk because you're trying to teach the Word of God, all right? So it's not an embarrassing thing if you need help or want to ask, all right? I would appreciate it if people come to me. Hey, what does this mean? Awesome. That's my job. I love that stuff. Come to me and ask. I don't care. Call me. All right. Okay, now, what you have in front of you, one of those, besides the outline, is a resource sheet. I did not want to spend a lot of time talking about all of the resources. Well, that's not all the resources, I guess, but that's some of them. That we can find in the church. The point is, though, you do have resources, and you got plenty of resources, okay? The church is not in shortage anymore of resources to find and use, all right? You just got to dig for them. And they're out, I mean, they're out there all the time. Every single one of them, usually they got a YouTube channel, they've got a Facebook page, whatever. They all got podcasts. Everybody got a podcast now, so you can find those things, okay? For teaching I mean, all of them can be used for teaching specifically, but if you can see there on the, like the third one down or whatever, the Broadway channel, YouTube channel, listen, Dan Owen does really good work. Really good work. Anyway, he's got commentaries out, teacher commentaries, but his channel, they have a nice job of what's the word I'm trying to use? Organizing their YouTube channel. So, Donnie, you were talking about it a while ago, but like the passage attack stuff, he's got his own podcast now, but you can find those things on Broadway's YouTube channel. It's super good. Conversations with Dan, there's like 200-something episodes that they've done just talking about random questions that people have sent in, and they'll spend 20, 30 minutes talking about those things. But very, very, very good resource, okay? But you have that. That's yours. If you need it and you're teaching, there you go. Look at those websites, look at those things, listen to those people if you need help. Okay, it's just a resource for you. Yeah. Okay, let's start getting into some of this stuff. The part about actually teaching the lesson. Okay, so kind of getting down to the more of the nitty-gritty stuff. Teaching the lesson, which is in this part, we'll just kind of start getting into more about methods, okay, and teaching and things you can do and different things you can do in your teaching. Stuart will cover a lot of that too next week and following. But, okay, when you think about teaching, all right, everybody usually has their own style, right? Typically, people have a natural style that they come away with when they start teaching. Okay, I had mine. Everybody kind of has one. It doesn't mean that they're wrong, whatever style that might be. It doesn't mean that they're wrong for having what they have or what they start with. It just is what it is. Everybody starts out with one. I do think, though, there are pros and there are cons to different teaching styles. Okay, so we'll kind of talk about those. Really, two main ones. But what do you think some of the styles are of teaching?
Lecturing.
Okay, yeah, that's lecturing. What else?
Discussion style.
Yep. Yeah, those are the two main ones. And then I think off of those, there may be some subcategories of styles. We'll talk about those. Yes, but lecture and discussion is primarily the main ones. Lecture style, pretty self-explanatory. I think you all know what that is. But you know, basically, you as the teacher does most of the talking, okay, while everyone else just kind of sits back, takes notes, listens, while information is being fed to them, similar to a college instructor and what you might get in a university and all that. There are some cons. There are some cons to it. There's pros. There are some cons to it as well, okay? So, cons to it, it often tends to be very one-sided, okay? Very one-sided, where the teacher, you know, is kind of just giving information, maybe pushing information a lot, unless somebody stops them and interjects, okay, stops the train, so to speak. And sometimes it can almost be like drinking water from a fire hose, that it's that much, okay? So much information that it becomes hard to digest it all right? But it's one-sided, right? It's kind of like a sermon, very one-sided, same thing. Another thing, got to watch out for this one too. Lecture style can also put people in a very passive state. Bruce Wilkinson in the 7 Laws of the Learner book talked a lot about this pit of passivity. And I thought it was really profound. Pit of passivity. He described this as kind of being this pit that people tend to fall into where there's no participation required in the class. Okay? You're just there. People are just there, and the only thing that is required basically is just to sit and listen. And he said what all of that kind of tends to do is put people in a pit, okay? Which is where people they can get into ruts sometimes. People can, get really complacent in that spot. There's contentment in that spot. People get happy and comfortable in that spot. All right, so that is a pitfall from a lecture style, one-sided style. You can put people in the pit of passivity. It happens, okay? Another thing that can happen is there's just little to no discussion going on. There's no interaction. There's hardly any participation going on. Yes, sir?
Without the feedback, how do you know your message is getting across?
That's true. That's true. You really don't, okay? That's a good point. So, little to no discussion or interaction, no questions that are getting asked from the teacher, like kind of the feedback stuff. Those are some cons. there's pros. There are pros. It does allow you to get a message across. If you've got something that not a controversial thing, but something that people need to hear, and maybe it's a doctrine or a truth that needs to get addressed or said, yeah, it allows you to do that. Like, you have the floor, you can speak on it, and people can kind of just sit there and listen, right? So it does allow you to at least get a message across, get your point across without any interjections, okay? It can be good if you must cover a lot of material, although I don't necessarily like that, because if we're just up there to cover material and just blaze through the material, I don't really see the point in that. Okay? I think we need to at least try to slow down. Anyway, but if you must lecture, you can get it done. Okay? So it does that. You do have a better chance of avoiding rabbit holes. Okay? Lecture style. You don't have a lot of, talking going on or discussion going on, so people, they're not really allowed, so to speak, to, go down the rabbit trails and all that. You might be able to explain more in depth, which can be helpful maybe to new Christians. Okay, they're just there, they're eager to learn, they can sit there and just digest and take it in. So that can be helpful. And you can really just, maybe hammer a point, get kind of down in depth on that. It can keep people from dominating a class. Okay, if it's just one-sided, right? It's just you talking, so it can keep people from that. And then it can also be helpful, like if you have a large class. I mean, if you think you have a 50, 60, sometimes even larger, well, that's going to be kind of hard to have a discussion-style class, right? There might be a few comments that you could ask in there, but if you try to get feedback from everybody, well, you're not really going to get very far. All right, so a lecture can help depending on the size of your class as well. Now, the second one, yes, it was the discussion. Yeah.
Just real quick on that, I think the other practical benefit to a lecture style is that in the situations that you might need it, it's more authoritative.
Yeah.
So if you need something to come across very strong, right? Like you said, it can keep others from dominating a class, but it also makes your message more authoritative and stronger. So in the event that that's needed, that
could be
very, very useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
We're moving on.
No, you're good. Speak up if you got something. Yeah.
It does limit your lecture style, limits the class, only the perceptions of the speaker, what he expects to bring to the class, and not always necessarily what the class needs from the speaker.
There you go. That kind of goes back to your feedback point, and I think I'll have that in the discussion part, but it does limit different perspectives, right? Remember, and I think I have this in the book, when teaching, you have to remember too that you're usually not, there are other people in the crowd that are smart, that know stuff, okay? They have their wisdom. There's wisdom floating around. So if you have a strict just lecture style, sometimes it kind of inevitably shuts off any kind of that extra wisdom that you might get or other people might be able to get or hear, right? If it's only one-sided, they're only hearing your perspective sometimes, unless you've thought of a bunch of stuff beforehand in your prep and you throw that out there. But I've been in a lot of classes where I'm glad I threw out something and opened up the floor because so-and-so said something that was way better than what I had. And now the rest of the class can benefit from that. See what I mean? It makes a difference. Yes, Blue.
Will the handout be a distraction or positive for teaching as a lecture style?
Well, it depends. I think you could see it as both. I'll tell you why I started doing outlines, I was actually at Medill and people were like, hey, we'd like to have something to work with while you teach. Like, okay, that's fine if you want to. And so people ate it up and they enjoyed it, and I just kept doing it. So yeah, it could go both ways.
You gotta take into consideration people learn different ways. Right?
Yep. Yep.
So some may get something out of note taking, some may not.
Absolutely.
Hearing it, actually getting to physically do something like right now can even.
Yeah. I mean, some people love to, yeah, just have something to write down while they listen, right? There's a lot of different ways. That actually goes into preaching too. Nowadays, I mean, some guys don't do it. They're like, I'm not doing a PowerPoint. I'm just going to preach and they can listen to me. Well, that's fine. If you want, if you can keep them captivated long enough. Some guys can, some guys can't. But as far as how learning goes and how people learn, yeah, some people are what? They're visual, right? Some people like to write down stuff. Some people are strictly audible. And so if you can incorporate all of those things, which is why I have a PowerPoint, so people can see stuff, all right, visually remember it, take a picture of it sometimes mentally. I just try to sometimes incorporate all of them, right? So, but audience analysis, that's kind of what it comes down to also. You just know how people learn, and get feedback. Ask them. I mean, it doesn't have to be an unspoken thing. Just ask. What do y'all want? Do y'all want an outline? Do you want a PowerPoint? Be flexible. Okay, if people want something, hey, give it to them. Give it to them. If it helps them learn better, sure. You know how long it takes me to make that little outline? Like 10 minutes. I just go off of what I already have prepared and just ask the question. So it's not a big thing. Anyway, any other thoughts there?
Brian Hunt mentioned, I have Bill Sherman said the lecturer controls the time and can always quit on time.
That's true. Oh, we got a special one for Bill Sherman later.
I would like to say one of the cons is not all lecturers are created equal.
No, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. We will talk about that in just a minute, though. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Sure you didn't. Sure you didn't. Yeah, the guy beside you did. Yeah. 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 Really, it's how he feels, huh? Right. He's your elder. Okay. Discussion-based stuff. Okay. On the other side of the spectrum, maybe, you have this one. You have a discussion style of teaching, discussion-based style. That's where, you have a lot of questions that are being asked. You try to get people talking more. You try to get them active. You try to get them more engaged. Kind of more of an interactive style in class. And sometimes the teacher in that can just act almost like just a facilitator at that point. Okay, if there's a lot of discussion going on, that can also be bad. But anyway, okay, first off, the cons to this, though. Sometimes with discussion style, it can still drift into talking too much to where you're not actually even covering what you have prepared. People can get off on stuff and you're not even on the subject anymore. Okay, which is the second thing also. It has a tendency to get way off topic if you don't control it. All right, that's kind of one of the perks, I guess, as a teacher. You are in control as a teacher. Okay, people look to you. You're in the authoritative position. You can control the class, but you better be able to control a discussion class and not let it get out of hand. Okay, so, but it does have a tendency to do that. Chase rabbits if you're not careful. It may be challenging also to manage the time. All right, you'd have to learn to build your lesson that allows time for discussion. All right. So, which means you may not have a whole lot of material, but if you've got good questions, open-ended questions that you could actually kick around the room and people are discussing and people are talking, Stuart will hit that next week maybe, But that affects how you prep and how much you prep. Okay, you've got to work on that, and that takes time. And after you teach more and more, you'll learn kind of, okay, where I'm at if I have this much, how long the class might be, or just build in at least, I don't know, a 5-minute discussion in there, 2 or 3 of those. I don't know. You learn that stuff as you go, kind of by trial. Okay, another con is it sometimes can end up shortening a class. Okay, again, if you're having to stick to a quarter system, okay, congregations have quarter systems, some don't, some do. If you're having to stick to a quarter system and you're having a lot of discussion in your classes, well, naturally then, that's going to shorten the amount of material that you actually cover. All right, so you just have to be very mindful. You got to be very mindful of that and be very choosy, I would say, with your lesson planning, so that you can still get through what you want to get through, but yet still have plenty of discussion. Okay, but I think we'll discuss that more actually later. And that, yeah.
You
Yeah.
also need a group of people who are willing to participate.
Yeah.
So, like, if you go into a class planning to do a lot of discussion,
Mm-hmm.
everybody just stares at you.
Yeah.
Or you just get that one person who's really going to answer every question.
Yeah.
It changes the whole structure of what you do, because
It can.
you built it for them to discover things on their own.
Yes.
And they're not doing it.
Yes.
They're just getting a lecture from that one guy in the audience.
Yeah.
Keeps answering everything.
Yeah. And sometimes in a class, you might be closer with someone and be like, hey, if we get stalled, I need you to pull me out of the pit here, man. Help me out. Yeah, make me look good or something. You have those people, but you don't want them overtaking the class either. You don't want them, constantly answering all the questions. We'll talk about too later about silence. Silence isn't necessarily the enemy, right? Sometimes when you have silence, you want to tend to, speak up in the awkward silence, but I'll sit there for 30 seconds till somebody finally says something. But that means they're processing is what I'm getting at, okay? Anyway, but yeah, sometimes it doesn't work out, your discussion stuff, and people just stare at you. Anyway, there are pros, and I think pros far outweigh the cons to this style. People are going to be less passive in a discussion-based and style class. They're going to be less passive, which means people are more engaged and they're more active in the class. Okay? Hopefully. It's going to allow more people to contribute to the class. So more people are going to be able to speak up, say what they want to say sometimes, and you're going to allow for that. So it's good. It can be a good thing. It also allows for follow-up questions for people. It's like you can get down, and we'll talk about this too, but you can get down sometimes into the second, third, fourth question sometimes. It's like if you give me an answer, if Greg gives me an answer, I'm going to say, well, what do you mean by that? Oh, what do you mean by that? How? Boom, but you see how much deeper you can go? Discussion allows for that. And that's where it gets really good and really interesting. Okay? When you get down into the second, third, and fourth questions and you start prying open what people are actually thinking, you can do that in a discussion. Okay? Deeper thinking. And then just practical application also can be made. Not that you can't bring that out in a lecture style, all right, but you can talk more about those things, more practically, real life stuff. How does this affect our life? Open the floor. You can talk about all of that stuff and, get things discussed and shared amongst the group, which can promote growth. Sometimes I've thought some of the best classes I walked out of were some of the ones that we just were kicking around spiritual thoughts and spiritual things, and everybody was engaged in talking. And I walked out of some and I was like, I think I grew today. Not that you can't in another style, but in a lot of the discussion classes that you get to just kick ideas around and you get people participating, it feels better sometimes. Anyway, I digress. Yes. What? Yeah.
One of the things that to consider with that is the idea that it allows susceptibility when you're preparing.
Yes.
You can prepare to, you know, like you said, if you're worried about the silence, you can prepare to have things that, okay, if they don't, nobody wants to discuss this, I can bring out these points and try and
Yep.
do that too.
Yep.
But
And you better have some prepared extra if nobody says stuff.
but it allows you to also direct that part to, okay, do I want to go
Mm-hmm.
into that follow-up? Do we need to go into that follow-up?
Do we need to? Yeah.
Covered it, you know, and being able to help identify the people, make sure that you acknowledge them when they're bringing their points.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times in classes, as a teacher, like you said, you probably noticed, they'll be making a point, and that gives me a thought that I can go further with.
Yep.
That and ask, gives me an ability to make to do the follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to also help us with that practical application. Okay, let's dive into the practical.
Yeah. Yeah. But you just got to gauge that, you know, and that's what you do as a teacher. You just kind of are watching that. Can I take that deeper? Do we want to go there now? Do we want to wait? All that gets played into that. So yeah, very good point. Anyway, I would say that, you know, discussion and lecture are the two main styles, but then in those styles of teaching, I think you do have, like I said, some of these subcategories of teaching. Some people, you know, prefer to teach verse by verse, okay, in a more expository way. Totally fine. I like to do that when you get into textual classes, yeah, and draw things from the text and all of that. Some people try to teach in more of a guiding kind of way, to where you don't, you're like, as a teacher, you're not just automatically telling the class the answer, giving them the answer or a truth. You're helping them, you're guiding them along, and you're helping them through the questions that you ask them. You guide them, and they can make the conclusions, right? You guide them to the correct conclusion. Some people teach in that way. Some people try to teach from case studies. They try to teach from real life situations, scenarios. Some are storytellers, to where, you know, you talk through lessons in a very narrative kind of way. Almost done. You won't see me for a few weeks, so hang on. In a very narrative way. Some people are all about workshop style classes. Workshop style class, to where you're filling something out, maybe an outline or something. You're doing word studies. You have small groups in class that are working on things, hands-on. There's different ways to go about it, okay? But you can do that through a lecture style. You can do that through more of a dynamic discussion style. I think it's good if you can get to a point to where you can work in a little bit of everything. Sometimes kind of more well-rounded, be able to do it all, okay? Yeah, but to where you can incorporate different styles.
Some teach in parables.
That's true. That's true. Well, shoot. I'm not going to do it. I had some more stuff about why most people usually resort to a lecture style. I'll pass that off to Stuart, and you can just hit that. Yeah. Yeah. Sit down. No. But I will say this. When it does come down to teaching and all that, the 7 Laws of the Learner book did talk about you'll see that later. Did talk about this, like as far as teachers. Teachers, he said, cause students to learn the material. And great teachers cause great numbers of students to learn great amounts of material. he emphasized and put the responsibility back on the teacher rather than solely on the student. And I think that's an interesting thought. It's not always on the student. Sometimes it's on the teacher as well. Okay, so here's things to think about as you teach. How can you foster learning with the people that you have in front of you as a teacher? This idea of causing people to learn, making them learn, right? How can you teach for change? How can you teach in order to equip, back to Ephesians 4, 11 and 12? How can you teach in order to build up? Remember, that the filter, run it through those things, okay? Look, we bear every one of those responsibilities as a teacher. You bear every one of them. You've got to cause people to learn, foster learning, help teach for change in people's lives. Teach to equip, teach to build up, man. It's not a willy-nilly thing. It's a very serious thing, teaching.